One, yes. Well, we start with today's session. The session is all about cardiac issues, the various lesions, their pathophysiologies, and what we need to know from regional anesthesiologist's perspective, and how regional anesthesia bails us out of that. So we are going to look at it from this aspect. Well, so I present two speakers for this. It's quite an interactive session between both of them, and of course we are free to participate in it. I present the first speaker of this day. He's Dr. C.K. Ponde. He's the chief cardiologist from Hinduja Hospital. He's a very revered person in his subject. He's an interventional cardiologist, has innumerable publications, presentations, and very active in research. He's an excellent father and a very nice husband, I can tell, because I happen to be his wife. So I guess we get going. And the second speaker is Dr. Bala Venkat. So could I please invite them on stage? Last Raw had their session and it was quite a hit, so we thought, let's bank upon the dependable.
Very good morning, all of you. I must say that I received the invitation of this lecture approximately 10 days ago from Bala, who called me in his extremely polite voice. Dr. Ponde, can I take you a minute? I said, of course. He said, how are you going? How are we going on Sunday? I said, which Sunday? He said, 17th. He said, what about 17th? He said, you don't know? We are talking together again. I said, you're kidding. He said, no, definitely. We are talking again. And that is how we went. He said, Vishali did not tell you? I said, no, she didn't. And when I asked her, she said, of course you're talking. What do you mean? That of course had so much of affirmation. I had no choice, So here I am. So let us start with this interesting subject, physiology, and I will cover a few interesting disorders which you commonly hit in clinical practice, but not all of them, of course. So physiology and hemodynamics of cardiovascular disorders and their implications in anesthesia. As it happens always, whenever a cardiac patient is going for a non-cardiac surgery, a lot of hue and cry is created about his preoperative evaluation and fitness and so on. But let me tell you, I'm on the hit list of many surgeons. Because I believe that surgeons are a peculiar species of animals. For most of them, surgeries are urgent. All surgeries are urgent and unavoidable. So having said this fundamental clear, let us talk about factors deciding choice of anesthesia in a cardiac patient. Nature and severity of cardiac disorder is the one. Of course, that has to be evaluated. What is the quantum of cardiac burden or cardiac morbidity? Clinical behavior of this disorder in the preceding 8 weeks. That is particularly true for ischemic heart disease patient. A patient may have a myocardial infarction in the past and then has been having a stable angina. No major cardiac event in the last 8 weeks, is a relatively safe patient for all of us. Coexisting medical conditions. Does the patient have renal failure? Is he a diabetic? More than 10 years of diabetes? Does he have associated COPD? And so on. Type and likely duration of surgery. If it's vascular surgery going to last more than 3 hours, you are in trouble. You need to take a lot of precautions. But if it is just cataract, even an unstable cardiac patient can be made fit for cataract surgery. So it's a delicate balance between the risk of surgery, the quantum of cardiac burden against the clinical behavior of this disorder in the preceding 6 weeks. Anesthetic risks of GA and regional anesthesia in that particular patient. Let us start with coronary artery disease. As we know, we have 3 major epicardial coronary arteries, and they determine the myocardial oxygen supply. But for you and me, rather than anatomy, what is important is, what are the determinants of myocardial oxygen consumption? The first is the heart rate. Foremost is the heart rate. Unless your heart rate is well controlled before surgery, you can be assured that you may have a lot of perioperative ischemic problems. So you see to it that your patient's heart rate is at least 60 before surgery. Systolic blood pressure derives wall stress, and that has to be around 130 to 120 systolic. And if those goals are achieved by your physician, cardiologist, or yourself, approximately 48 hours pre-op, you will be really safe. LV contractility, if the ejection fraction is depressed, the myocardial oxygen consumption increases because the wall stress increases. It is a inverse relation. Severity of underlying coronary artery disease, the more severe coronary artery disease, you will have more oxygen demands of the myocardium at even low levels of stress. And autonomic tone, if the patient has a higher autonomic tone, resting tachycardia, high systolic BP, which are the indices of autonomic tone, the demands of the myocardium will be high. The control of coronary blood flow is decided by the length of diastole. Diastole favors subendocardial flow and the systole favors the subepicardial flow. But for you and me to remember that the mean coronary arterial pressure is what determines the coronary flow in systole and diastole both. And if it is below 40 mean, the subendocardial flow goes low. So if you have a protracted hypotension with a mean BP of less than 40 during surgery, you will expect this patient to have a perioperative ischemia. And the subepicardial flow has a little lesser cutoff. That doesn't go low so soon when the mean pressure goes below 25. There is some degree of coronary autoregulation, which is endothelium dependent, and resistance vessels dilate progressively as the mean pressure falls. But again, this is not so true in diabetics, end-stage renal disease, and patients who have 2 or more vascular risk factors for more than a decade. I repeat again, diabetics, end-stage renal disease, and 2 or more vascular risk factors for more than a decade. In them, the endothelium-dependent autoregulation of coronary flow is not at its best. It's far too suboptimal, and here you need to take care. Factors that lead to myocardial ischemia intra or post-operatively are tachycardia. Number 2, absence of beta blocker use preoperatively. Severe hypotension, mean BP of less than 40 lasting more than 30 minutes intra-op. Aortic cross-clamping and the duration of cross-clamping during vascular surgery. Severe blood loss even without hypotension. Supraventricular arrhythmia and with uncontrolled ventricular rate during surgery. A lot of people come out and tell in the emergency room, in the ICU, no, we had a blood loss, but patient never had hypotension. So that is very important. Severe blood loss, even without hypotension, can precipitate myocardial ischemia. Fatal myocardial infarctions usually occur in patients with critical fixed stenosis, but 1/3 of myocardial infarctions do occur in patients with non-obstructive coronary plaques. In fact, there was a beautiful study published in the British Journal of Anesthesia just last month, Jan, which said that as many as 11% of the perioperative myocardial infarctions occur in patients who have minor 20%, 30%, and 40% plaque. They had an angiogram 5th day or 7th day after the surgery and were shown to have minor plaque disease. So what happened actually? The plaque ruptured. The plaque ruptured and became vulnerable. So there are 3 types of syndrome as we know: ST elevation myocardial infarction, ST depression, and T-wave inversion, what is called non-ST elevation myocardial infarction. And the definition of syndrome goes by the ECG. If you have no ST elevation and the cardiac markers are negative, it is called unstable angina. And if you have no ST elevation but the cardiac markers are positive, it is called non-ST elevation myocardial infarction, or it is called NSTEMI. NSTEMI, standard term now well established in literature. And on the other side, you have ST elevation MI, which is far more dangerous, far more worse to handle in the perioperative period than a non-ST elevation MI. When plaque rupture occurs, there occurs a non-occlusive thrombus, which leads to non-ST elevation MI. And if the occlusive thrombus, you have ST elevation MI. So if the thrombus occludes the artery completely, you get ST elevation myocardial infarction. If you see the anatomy of the atherosclerotic plaque, you have a lipid-rich core there, this lipid-rich core, and if the lipid-rich core is big, you have a plaque which is unstable. As against, if you have a lipid-rich core which is small with a thick fibrous cap, then you have a stable plaque, a relatively stable plaque. Now, there is no way to know this preoperatively, isn't it? There is absolutely no way to know, but we must know what are the clinical predictors of a stable plaque versus unstable. And the only single clinical predictor is the behavior of the patient's symptoms in the preceding 8 weeks before he has landed up with you. If the patient says, doctor, 7 days back, I had a meal and post-meal I had a heaviness, he has an unstable plaque. If he says that until 3 months ago I used to take 2 rounds of Shivaji Park, but now last 7 days, doctor, half a round and I'm panting, my neck chokes, I have heaviness in the arms. Here is an unstable patient. He cannot be taken for a non-cardiac elective surgery. If it is an emergency non-cardiac surgery, you have no choice. But elective surgery, you'll have to wait and evaluate the patient. What are the how do you detect perioperative ischemia? Is number 1, ECG changes. Number 2, if the patient has unexplained hypotension, think about ischemia. Unexplained hypotension. Many times we have been called in the ICU, patient has hypotension, and even an ECG is not taken. That's not done. So if you have unexplained hypotension or dyspnea, it can be ischemia. If your patient has an ill-sustained ventricular tachycardia or a complex ventricular ectopy, polymorphic VT, short runs, ill-sustained VT, short runs, couplets and triplets coming far too frequently than can be explained by the hemodynamic changes in the patient or the electrolyte imbalance in the patient, then of course ischemia should be suspected. And of course, troponin T cutoff limit is 0.6 and increase in the CPKMB more than 2 times the upper limit of normal. Now, there are clinical predictors, this we, of course, all of you all know this, which can predict increased cardiovascular risk of MI, death and heart failure in the postoperative period. The major predictors are unstable angina, recent MI within the last month or so, decompensated heart failure, significant arrhythmias and severe valvular disease. Now, if you carry this, and all my residents do carry this in a short laminated card here, which are the major predictors of cardiovascular risk. Then there are intermediate predictors of cardiovascular risk: mild angina, prior myocardial infarction, prior decompensated heart failure, prior or compensated heart failure, insulin-dependent diabetic. Please remember, insulin-dependent diabetics, normally when we say, we immediately think about starting juvenile diabetes. No, they are the maturity onset diabetes, but who are on insulin. I mean by that, these are the people who almost equal, their risk is equal to the patient who has already suffered a myocardial infarction. This is very, very important statement I'm making, that if you have an insulin-dependent maturity onset diabetic, please connote in your brain that he already has had one MI. His risk equals to a non-diabetic person who already had one myocardial infarction. End-stage renal disease. Minor predictors are age more than 65, abnormal resting ECG, ST segment changes, rhythm which is any other rhythm other than sinus. If you have AF, if you have nodal rhythm, if you have intermittent junctional escape rhythm, any other rhythm other than sinus is a minor risk criteria. Low functional capacity. That means if patient says, it's practically sedentary patient, barely ever going out of the house. And you cannot evaluate his functional capacity. He is a patient who is to be included into the minor risk criteria. History of stroke and uncontrolled hypertension. Uncontrolled meaning the blood pressure more than 160/90 despite whatever drugs the patient is taking. The optimal blood pressure for any non-cardiac major surgery, I repeat, any non-cardiac major surgery or intermediate risk surgery is